This is Technical SEO 101, Early Hints. My name is Jackson Rep. I am the field CTO for Harper. My job is to help espouse the value of the platform we've built and ultimately the deliverables and the end results that we can give to customers and developers alike. We think we've built something pretty amazing. We'd love to dive into specific use cases on this series, not just tell you about what we think theoretically the benefits are, but we want to show you how to actually implement it. Our tagline is simplicity without sacrifice. And we like to think that we live up to that ideal every day. I am joined today by a couple of subject matter experts. Martin Speak, who is the CEO of SearchSide. He is an expert in SEO optimization and strategies. He's worked with very large clients. And Brian Apley-Martin. Brian Apley is the principal architect at Akamai, our CDN partner. I'll give Martin you a few seconds to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jackson. I appreciate it. Yeah. Depth of product, SEO product, almost 30 years of SEO product development. And so there's no silly question when it comes to SEO, either from a technical or a business aspect. And so looking forward to this first in a series on technical, important subject, and there's a lot of benefit from solving this.
Absolutely. And Brian?
Hey, everybody. Brian Apley, as Jackson said, I'm a principal cloud architect at Akamai. This is my 21st year at Akamai. So really excited. We've run the world's best content delivery company for the last quarter century. And very recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, with our addition of general purpose compute, now we can bring companies like Harper in to enhance our solutions with things like what you're about to see today and then the subsequent sessions. So thanks for having me and looking forward to this webinar.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let me share my screen so that we can get a general picture of what we're talking about today. This is part of Harper's education series, Technical SEO. These are the people you just met. Again, we are only subject matter experts because we have spent a lot of time doing this, but we are always interested in what you have to say and questions you might have. So feel free to open up the chat, ask us questions. We will attempt to get to those as quickly as possible. The agenda today is 101 Early Hints, Technical SEO 101 Early Hints. We'll start with kind of an overview of what they are, why they matter, why you should care, what role perhaps each a platform like Harper, SEO expert like Martin, and a representative from one of the world's largest CDNs like Brian, each play in delivering something like an early hint, in addition to how we can expect that they might improve a product. Then we'll go into a demo where we actually implement them on a site that's near and dear to my heart, harpersystems.dev. And then ultimately we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So without further ado, what is Harper and why on earth are we talking about this? We are a globally distributed web performance platform. We combine many of the common ingredients that you need to build modern applications, including a database, an in-memory cache, an application layer, and a host of real-time and HTTP interfaces, just about everything you need for a full-stack development project. And we can run anywhere, either in the cloud, at the edge, or on-prem, and any combination thereof. So we're extraordinarily flexible, and having all of those ingredients in a single platform makes everything better. As you can see at the bottom, we work with some of the largest companies in the world, and obviously our strategic partner, Akamai. And this is ultimately the battle we fight every day. Traditional web architectures, where all of the components I mentioned are all different products, and there are network connections between all of them, and it takes a little extra time every single time you want to do something for all of those pieces and parts to connect. Where Harper takes a different approach and includes all of those into a single installable package where you simply plug in your apps. They have immediate access to all of those features, much lower latency, much greater resiliency because we are built to be distributed. And ultimately, we can affect some of the most important metrics in web performance, specifically stuff like Core Web Vitals. And you can see an example of how we've lowered one of the most important of those Core Web Vitals, LCP, largest contentful paint. And how we did that is using a technology called, or a protocol called, early hints. So without further ado, we'll kind of say, why would I even care about something like an early hint and improving web performance overall? So for that, I'll turn it over to Martin.
Yeah, so it's very important to the end device and desktop, mobile. So iOS, Android, and the consumer that's using the device, that we understand their lack of time and their desire for convenience. And that convenience and our ability to answer that request for convenience based on speed, the speed of delivery, speed of the website, speed of the interaction on the screen is really important to the customer, and that increases the customer's engagement. It's a human nature that as I'm experiencing a positive outcome based on speed or convenience on the respective screen or device, that I'm going to remain engaged. I'm going to spend more time on the respective site. I'm going to view more pages, and I'm going to, in viewing more pages, probably likely get closer to a transaction or a microtransaction, filling in a form, going down and filling out a cart. If I'm repurchasing or replenishing an existing product, I'll do that faster, and I'll add more items to my cart. So I end up with better performance. I end up with a more engaged customer. I end up with better conversion rates. I end up with incrementally more revenue, because at the end of the day, the customer's convenience, we're providing through performance or speed, we're providing a delightful experience for the customer, the consumer. Literally, it's a level of delightment from their device that they, in return, remain engaged and spend more money.
Sure. It seems like it's an arms race, right? I don't have to outswim the shark. I just have to outswim the other people who are trying to sell things to our common customer base. So it's one of those things that if you can do it and it's easy enough and small enough of a lift to do it, you absolutely should if it increases web performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess that speaks to kind of this return on investment. So we've talked about, I guess, the return on that investment. So again, making it easy, but let's first dive into kind of what they even are. What are early hints? If you have asked for a web page before, you have experienced the HTTP request cycle where your browser, your client, your mobile app asks for a web page. The server that it connects to via perhaps a CDN or maybe just connecting directly to the server looks at that request and says, of all the pages I have here, that's the one you want. I'm going to package up that HTML and I'm going to send that back to your browser. And that comes with a response code of 200. And 200 is good. You've likely experienced a 404. A 404 is inherently bad, like I could not find that page. But there's a new kid on the block, a new response code called 103. And that is a partial response. A partial response means that the server can tell the browser something, send back a little bit of information, and say, also, I'm going to come back with that 200 and that full page. But in the meantime, here's a little information on something I want you to do. And because this payload is much smaller, it gets there much more quickly. And an early hint is a partial 103 response that says, while you're waiting for me to package up this rather large HTML page and ship it to you, here's a tiny snippet of code that tells you that I want you to download a couple of things that are small. They aren't packaged, or they're part of, but not packaged with this page. And by the time that page needs them, you will already have it. So if you could go ahead and start doing that, that'll be great. And I'll be back with the rest of the page shortly. this is there. Prior to 103, there were things like pre-connect and prefetch headers in the HTML page. So you could put them very high up on your page. And when the browser was working through that HTML, it would see that and say, oh, I should go get that image. I should go get that style sheet. I should go handle the handshake to that domain so that when I reach that image on the page, I've already downloaded it, or I've already at least done the SSL handshake with that domain so that I can pull it down more quickly. The challenge with that is that it requires that you have all of the HTML first. So for a very large page, and web pages are increasingly large, it may take a while for you to even get to the part where you reach that tag. So a 103 response kind of shortcuts that and allows the browser to start working on a task before it even has that HTML. The advantage, obviously, is that it takes less time when the page finally actually gets to that image to render it. And when we're talking about why that matters from a technical SEO perspective, we're talking about things like time to first byte and largest contentful paint, the core web vitals that Google looks at when it decides whether or not your page ultimately is a good representation of not only the content, but also the performance that they want their users to experience. And they are relatively simple to implement, as you can imagine. I'm asking for a web page. This is simply something that stands in the middle of that and returns a little snippet of information. So in terms of returning information quickly to users and to clients, there's always the role of CDN. So Brian, I'll let you inform us as to how somebody like Akamai plays a role in an early hint.
Yeah, and I'll build on what you described, Jackson, in terms of that hint file being metadata about the page that the customer's about to get, or that the user is about to get. So clearly we can see that the delivery of that hint file itself, or whatever the hints contain in that 103 response, is critical. Because without a speedy response for that, the server will never continue on to actually delivering the page, and or it will be delayed. And overall, like, you can delay your entire page if you don't implement early hints correctly. So that's really where a CDN comes in. I mentioned I've been doing this for only 21 years. I can remember 20 years ago, having to convince or talk to retail customers about how performance matters. I think it's accepted science now that, performance does help a website in terms of conversion and in terms of browsing and increased pages. These are all things that, Akamai as a CDN really pioneered 20 years ago in terms of thinking about performance in this way. Now the difference is we have a compute layer. We can run Harper systems at that compute layer, and Harper systems can inject this dynamic data, because we know from page to page, what you send in that early hint is going to be important, and it's going to matter, and it might change over time as your pages change over time. So this hinting data is very dynamic, and it's important, even though it is dynamic, to be able to serve it really, really quick at CDN caching speeds. For the US, that's 60 to 100 milliseconds for every user that's in the country. So, the CDN, besides our normal operations of caching all of the data that we can, accelerating the network call for things that we can't cache and we have to go back to an origin for, as well as, security. Like, people might know Akamai more for security now than actual web performance. But, these are all the services that the CDN provides, and that is covered under that. And when we get to the demo portion, we'll show how easy it is, to implement this change in the property, and how to enable early hints. It's quite easy to do, and we do it for quite a few customers. So it's fairly settled in terms of how you implement this. That's the service and the role of the CDN in this.
Sure, and obviously there are lots of things that CDNs can do, and Akamai is no stranger in that you continually move some functions. You have you have Edgeworkers, which is your kind of functions as a service at the far edge. How does this play? How does something like an Edgeworker play with a platform like Harper for early hints? Like, why do I need to? Why are they two separate products?
Yeah, so an Edgeworker is a very lightweight server-side JavaScript function. Our Edgeworkers platform is based on the Chrome V8 JavaScript engine. And if you've seen anything about Akamai, you've probably seen, we've got close to 500,000 servers throughout the global internet. Our Edgeworker engine runs on each and every one of them. So if we think about you, me, Jackson, Martin, as an individual user, we're going to connect to an Akamai server that's very, very close to us, probably in the same state or province as we are. And that Akamai server will actually be the execution point for the Edgeworker. So, while the Edgeworker is a great function platform, it can't do things like store a robust database like, say, Harper can. So we use the Edgeworker in this case to basically insert the early hint. So when the user hits the paths that we have enabled for early hints, we have a rule that will be invoked at Akamai that says, run this Edgeworker. The Edgeworker code will then go to Harper and fetch the early hints specific to that page, and then insert them in, via the 103 response code. So there's kind of a two-layered approach here, as you mentioned, Jackson. We use the Edgeworker, which is massively distributed and close to every set of eyeballs on the planet, as the injection point, and then we use Harper, which is also massively distributed, although not 500,000 strong. We use Harper to provide the data specific to that page, which can be very, very dynamic.
Awesome, that's super helpful. And there's a question in the chat. Before we move on to the demo, Josh wanted to know if there are multiple factors affecting conversion, which one would have to imagine there always are. Where does speed fit relative to the others? How important is this web performance metric that we are espousing as important relative to other things? So I'll let Martin speak to that.
Speed's important to the customer on the other end. If the customer is concerned for time and convenience is the preeminent factor in their day, which it is, Google tells us that the consumer, mom mainly in the United States, is driving 80% of retail, and mom is doing multitasking during her day. Kids, the household, the dog, the pets, dinner, her own work day. Then convenience is defined in time, and time when you're interacting with your device, desktop, and there's multiple tabs open, multiple windows open, multiple websites open, and mom or the individual is interacting. Google tells us that the average individual interacts with 130 mobile touch points a day. 130 mobile touch points a day. Then your website is being compared to your competitors for reviews, for product, for pricing, for availability, near me, coupons, social, and 100 other different types of awareness, decision-making, and action. So that all has to be compressed in a very short period of time. So milliseconds matter. Half seconds matter when the individual on their device is tapping between windows or tabs or pages. And so more time to the customer by accelerating their individual window will end up being more pages, more page views, more minutes on site or seconds on site, more pages, and the more respectful of the individual's time, or you're acknowledging trust as a retailer by providing that accelerated experience. The consumer begins to trust the brand or the website because they feel that you understand their experience and that time in their day or their convenience is critical for them. So if you provide them a faster, even milliseconds faster experience, they spend more time on your site. They remember your site. They do mental bookmarking. They not only engage in that deeper current session towards cart and put more items in the cart for more revenue, they also begin to get a higher trust level of your brand, and you're developing a relationship for return or repeat lifetime value of the customer. So revenue all the way around, including lifetime value, immediate session improvements in engagement and revenue and conversion, but also return customers to your website.
Sure. I guess a follow-up would be, if you have a terrible site and it's hard to find the add to cart button, you should fix that first.
You should fix that. Yeah.
But loading the pages and making that fast is the primary job of web performance specialists. There are entire divisions of companies that are focused on making sites fast because, again, you are compared to other people, other sites that are offering the same product in many respects, in many cases. And if you are slower or cumbersome, or I can't find the add to cart button, then I will go to the competitor and I will purchase it there. So it really is an arms race. And so use every tool you can at your disposal.
Performance in today's market is table stakes. Literally, it's table stakes as a retailer. It's if you want to engage the customer on a regular basis, this is your baseline. It's your table stakes into interacting with the customer.
Totally understand. Well, I'm sold. I feel like we should implement some early hints. So onward then to the demo, my favorite part, because, roll the dice. We've attempted to remove as many of the dice from the table as possible, but do bear with us in case the demo gods take over. Today's demo, ironically, is on our website. We host our website on Webflow. It leverages CDNs to deliver assets, but one thing it does not yet support is early hints. So we thought, much like many of Harper's customers, we would eat our own dog food today and ultimately do a site analysis. We'll have Martin kind of go over, what a Lighthouse score is and how that works, and we'll kind of gather that information. Then I'll deploy an instance of Harper, deploy our open source early hints component, configure it, and ultimately test that it is working, returning some early hint data, i.e. what is the hero image for a specific page. And then we'll have Brian walk through how to deploy the Edgeworker code. That Edgeworker code is contained in our open source component. So if you're an Akamai customer, it's everything you need is right there to deploy that lightweight Edgeworker code to your Edgeworker infrastructure and your delivery property. And then we'll run some tests on the page with early hints. And all things being equal, I would expect to see better numbers. Always results in a massively optimized site like a Webflow. They leverage CDNs. So there's always a very small difference between numbers, but we hope that it is significant enough. And just in the testing I've done before we did this webinar, I believe, in fact, that it is. So without further ado, let's talk about the initial analysis of the site. So I'll be driving here for this. This is harpersystems.dev. You can see that right up there. And this is a Lighthouse score. So if you're on Chrome, you can open up your inspector tools. You can right click and hit inspect. It'll open up these. Most of the time it opens up on the elements page, and you can go over here and look at Lighthouse, and you can analyze page load. So while I'm doing this, Martin will tell me exactly what it's doing.
So we're gonna see LCP. We're gonna see time to first byte. We're gonna see LCS or CLS. Sorry about that. And then there we go. So we're getting time to first byte, or page speed index. Yep, we're getting largest contentful paint is 2.9, which is slow. Time to first byte is, we're down in the speed index of 1.7. And so the page is loading, most of the content is loading slowly. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement in compressing the libraries, the code, the JavaScript, all which can be accelerated by early hints. SEO on this page, interesting enough, SEO on this page came out as a 92. So the content aligns with the subject matter of the page, the title, the tags. And so, Jackson, that's the key, not just the accessibility part, but that's the key, is affecting time to first byte with early hints and having the most impact on largest contentful paint, or LCP. Yep.
Great. And so I would be remiss if I said that this is a cure-all for everything that could possibly be wrong with your site. Early hints can, as Martin said, they can send some assets early. If I send a lot of assets early, if I hint everything, I will hint nothing, because as soon as the HTML 200 comes back, we stop processing. So we stop loading and we start parsing and we start rendering. So it's important to correctly and effectively select what you are going to hint. Things like time to first byte, that is just simply, as soon as I start downloading. So immediately an early hint can help there. Largest contentful paint, it's a very specific image on the page. And in fact, it will tell you what that image, you can see that kind of in the render chart here, what that largest contentful image is and what that needs to be, to what we would want to improve, and what we would want to target. So you don't want to early hint everything. So you want to be very, very judicious about what you try to send back, because it is a network race on a otherwise very performant site, like something delivered via CDN that's largely static HTML, like our site. It doesn't take that long for this page to arrive. And we'll go over here and 79 3.0. So looks like my earlier tests were pretty similar in terms of those results. So pretty consistent. And what we've done today is we've taken 3 pages. So we can, I already opened this one. That's the one we ran the test on. But we've set up these 3 pages to have early hints specifically. And ultimately we can run the test on all of them, or we'll just run the test. It just depends on time. But the results when I ran them ahead of time were pretty indicative of the benefit you would get across all of them. So pretty similar results. Next, we'll move on to kind of the Harper component, and specifically how this application works. So I'm going to go to our studio, which is the management interface. Go to instances. This is my demo org. I've got a local instance that I run locally, which I'm not logged into. This is a cloud instance right here, demo Jackson rep. And I will log into that, and I can see that in my early hints database, I have product images as a table, and in there I've got that root level domain. And let's take a look at that early hint content, which I loaded in before we started the webinar. It is simply this early hint right here. This is the URL of the image that I want to early hint. So if I go back, it is a simple primary key lookup. The Edgeworker is going to say, hey, I'm intercepting a request, and this is the URL, i.e. harpersystems.dev. What have you got for me? So that I can return it. Now, there's a specific syntax that we return, and it's not just returning this URL. So I'm going to dive into the application itself. Again, Harper has not only this database, but it has the interface that's going to receive the request from the Edgeworker, and it has the application layer that's going to look up based on that URL and then return it in proper format. So here's the lookup: get product image, product table, get by URL. So that's that primary key lookup. And then here's where we format that. This is the hints exported endpoint. this basically says if somebody's a super user, i.e. I've restricted this to my user. And then this get method is a RESTful endpoint, and we're overriding the natural ID-based lookup. So I could say hints / just the URL, and I would get back that whole object. But instead, I want to look that up. If I don't have a URL, I'm going to return a 400. That's an error. I don't have an early hint for that, at which point the Edgeworker will just send the request to origin. But if I do, once I fetch that URL, I take it, I will turn it into an object. And for that, I will basically say, here's a status 200 return with the headers of a type, and the data is early hints. And this ultimately is the syntax right here, where it's image, like an open bracket, an image, and then the command is to preload it, and it is as an image, and then some security with cross origin. So this is the specific syntax that we return. And in fact, if you want to test that, since it is working, I will open this up. And you see when I hit, this is the request, harperdemo.connectedcloud.io, hints, and here is that URL. And this is what actually gets returned to the Edgeworker. So pretty easy for that to come back. And for those of you wondering about auth, I already did the basic auth for this page. That's why I wasn't prompted. Obviously, you would have to have that auth token coming from the Edgeworker, and Brian will go over kind of what that implementation looks like. But you can see that everything you need is completely contained in the application itself. So in the studio, here is the Edgeworker. This file is just part of a Git repo that's open source, available on our GitHub. You can import that. And in fact, if I wanted to add, if it weren't already here and I wanted to add one, I could simply import or deploy a remote application package, and I can choose that I want to get that from a public GitHub repo, or you can download a tarball and ultimately upload that from a URL. So lots of ways for you to deploy this, including GitHub Actions, if you want to maintain a package like this with your own specific logic and then push that out. So without further ado, now that we know that this early hint is working, I'm going to turn this over to Brian, who is going to walk you through how Edgeworkers work. So let me stop sharing, and Brian can start sharing. And while he's bringing that up, I will say that it is possible to do this without a CDN. Our application layer can host entire websites and deliver those files. The benefit of an Akamai CDN is that it can proxy that request through one of its 500,000 servers around the world, proxy that request to your origin in addition to returning that early hint. If Harper is the one returning that page content, we can return that early hint as a 103, and then we can, right after that, return the much larger 200 payload to the client.
I think the other piece, Jackson, is to make sure that the audience, I think they're going to, as professional engineers and SEO product, they're going to understand that RUM, real user metrics, is there a difference between Lighthouses and the lab, and then the RUM data is coming from their real user metrics, and there's a difference between the two. You can certainly use Lighthouse, and you can certainly, but then you need to look at your Crux data, your Chrome data, but then you also should be, based on the scale of your enterprise, looking at your RUM data across the 75 percentile and the 95 percentile, so that you're making sure that you're looking at the right pages, you're stack ranking and organizing and sequencing the work that you're doing, prioritizing the work that you're doing based on the depth of your customer journey or the depth of the bots that are also users coming in. There we go. I think Brian's back on, but I just want to make sure we talked about the difference between lab and then real user data is just as important when you're looking at the metrics and planning.
Sure. Absolutely. So Brian, tell us what we're looking at.
Sorry about that. You said something earlier about the demo gods. My microphone locked. Yeah, just to walk through what we're doing here. This is literally just one rule in the Akamai property manager. So as I said, it's fairly easy. And to back up for a second, the screen's over here, by the way. I'm not looking out the window. What we did here is we essentially layered a test host name, which is Harper demo connected-cloud.io. We layered that on top of the existing Harper site. So this is a common tool that we use in Akamai to test things, prior to them being Akamized. If you were to implement this in your environment, you would be implementing this on your main production or staging or QA site.
Brian, one of our viewers has noticed that your screen is a little small. Is there any way you could zoom in?
Absolutely. Let's just. I feel the pain of whoever said that because there's a reason these aren't for my good looks. So all good here? Can see okay?
I feel like I can see it.
Awesome. Jackson mentioned for purposes of this demo, we're only applying the early hints to these three paths. So that matches the paths, that Jackson indicated before. So what we're doing in the Akamai property here is saying, hey, if the request comes in and it matches one of these paths, we want to conduct some additional logic on that. So the first thing is we're going to fire the Edgeworker. We'll go into the code of the Edgeworker, but basically what we're doing is we're telling the Edgeworker immediately, based on the URL that the customer is requesting, go get the early hints from the Harper tier. So that's number one. Again, we'll go through the Edgeworker code for that. And then the Edgeworker is going to return a variable PM user _ 103 _ hints. And once that variable comes back, then we want to inject that into the response. So we're basically going to take what Harper gives us and then send it down the pipe in that 103 response code. Again, before the whole page is even loaded. That's really what makes this shine and what makes this so easy to implement for a performance performance improvement campaign.
Hey, Brian, could you zoom in? Could you zoom in just a little more? Josh is still having. There we go.
How's that work, Josh? Cool. The only option after that is to do the accessibility zoom, which I use quite a bit, but I don't think I can use it in the webinar here. So let's go to the Akamai Edgeworker, and I've actually got this on a different text editor, so it's easier to see. But basically, like I said, Akamai Edgeworkers, that's the capability for customers to deploy lightweight server-side JavaScript functions that, again, are executed right on the CDN edge, right close to where your customer or your user is. So let's go and look at what's going on in this Edgeworker. You can see it's very lightweight, 34 lines total of code. And as Jackson mentioned, we've got authorization enabled. So when we go forward to Harper, we're including the token. There's the token if somebody's going to steal it in the interim here. And then what we want to do is apply that Edgeworker on client request. So on that initial client request, as we saw, the first thing we're going to do is encode the page URL. So we have the request scheme along with what the user requested. This will be the query to Harper that we make. So we're going to query Harper's hints endpoint, and we're basically going to hand the URL that the customer requested, and we're going to ask, hey, what hints do you have for this particular resource or page? And really, those two lines there are really just encoding that request to send to Harper. And then after that, when we get the response code back, then we set that that response value as that variable, that PM user underscore 103 underscore hints. And then coming back here, just to refresh, we see that, you know, the Akamai property manager is going to take that value and inject it into, you know, into the response with the 103 response code. And that's really it. Like I said, we've templatized this. We have this running dozens of customers by now, so it's pretty settled science in terms of how to deploy it. And it works just fine with all of your other Akamai features, including the security features.
Awesome. That seemed super easy. So let's go back to SEO. I'll move back to sharing. So this is your presentation right here, and over here I have, let's see, what do I want? Test the Akamai endpoint. So if I want to test that Akamai endpoint, this is the endpoint that ultimately I am routing. It is parallel to the Harper site itself. So I open that up, and you can see this is our homepage, but it is at the domain that you have just configured. And so that is the one that has an early hint, hopefully enabled, if the demo gods are working with us. Again, this is what we scored before with largest contentful paint at 2.9 seconds. So now let's go to post analysis. These are some of the numbers I saw earlier. So Martin, I'm going to rerun that Lighthouse and
go ahead and rerun it. Yeah. There was red for LCP. It was above the 2.5. So previously it was 2.5 is the minimum we liked on LCP. There was no blocking time, 10 milliseconds. There was no shift time. Speed index was respectable. Tiny bit of work there, but respectful. And so then what does it post?
Let's take a look. Again, going through the exact same process, just pulling everything from a different domain, and it's going to run the request and hopefully come back with better numbers. If it doesn't,
the immediate thing we should see is the LCP change. There should be a delta. And right away, when you look at that, it went from 2.9 to 2. And so that is below the threshold of 2.5 that we want it to be as a starting point. It can be improved a little bit from there, but that is a really high quality change for just early hints of getting back basically 900 milliseconds, almost a full second. Now, again, it's a really light site. Blocking time did change, though, and went from 10 milliseconds up to 190. So I don't know if that's just a matter of going back through the test or the demo configuration network mainly. And if you look at the shift, had no change whatsoever. Speed index changed 1/10 of a second or 100 milliseconds, which is really actually pretty quality from a speed index standpoint. And you can sit there, and if you pull apart the rest of the code and keep improving and calibrating that speed, you can get the speed index even lower. And that speed index is almost a reflection, not quite a one-to-one, of total page download speed. But that's a incremental positive change from just implementing something as straightforward and simple as early hints.
I tend to agree. And just proof being in the pudding, I look at calling harpersystems.dev. This is the request that I made. I got back my 200. And then obviously my response comes back. Likewise over here, if I look at that network request at the proxy domain, you can see I get the 200, but I also had an early hint header. This is the link and loading as image. So you can see it in your developer tools when it is implemented properly. And obviously setting this up and configuring it the way Brian just did doesn't take very much time at all. So I will go ahead and chalk that up as a success today, which I always love to do. So now that we have that, let's talk about Q&A. What other questions do we have from the audience? And then fair warning, I've got some of my own because I ultimately want to ask the subject matter experts, Brian and Martin, to make me smarter because I don't know anything relative to
the first
them.
thing I want to go back to is on any website, and early hints may be exactly the same for every single page or path type or template type in a website. The homepage, department, top category, subcategory, resources pages, sitemap page. It could be exactly the same early hints. And so thus you could sit there and copy and paste or apply the early hint to each path or do a whole site under a single path. But I think it's important to sit there and communicate to the audience that there could be unique early hint configurations based on each path type, maybe. And
Sure.
so it's always good to go through each path type and say, I might be early hinting something on this template or path type over here that is slightly different or more resource intensive than the next path type. And thus kind of customizing the early hints towards maximizing resource use on path or template type.
Absolutely. There may be, we just did an image, but there may be lightweight style sheets that affect cumulative layout shift on your product detail page. So it may be very valuable to get that style sheet into memory as quickly as possible so that you minimize layout shift. There may be JavaScripts that do cool things like personalization that are very important so that my account pops up earlier. But again, we have to be judicious, and to the point that, as you continue to tweak, you may find that certain types of pages require different optimizations based on what moves a consumer through that funnel and toward ultimately my objective, which is conversion, whatever that might be for your site. We have a question from Josh. That's Brian. Brian, would you like to read the question? And since you also typed an answer, man, I don't have to do anything. This is great for me.
Yeah, Josh, you've got it right. Basically, we're using the Edgeworker to reverse proxy out to Harper, make that request to the Harper endpoint. We should add here, in our implementations, what we typically do is set up Harper in distributed locations, 4 or 5, in some cases up to 10 or even more nodes. And then, not to get too much into the Akamai minutia, but we've got a DNS-based global load balancer called Global Traffic Management. So basically, that Edgeworker is using, in production implementations, it's using a GTM name. So basically, the Edgeworker is saying, hey, I'm in Michigan, I'm in Colorado, I'm in Texas, wherever. What is the closest Harper node? And GTM routes that request to the closest Harper node. Harper returns that data, and then we actually deliver the response with that 103 status code. And if you're in something like Chrome DevTools, it's kind of hard to see because the 103 occurs so quickly, and then it's overwritten by the 200 OK response code when the HTML finishes loading or finishes delivering. But it does happen right at that point. And then, yes, whatever Edge protocol is enabled. So if the Akamai property is enabled for HTTP2 or H3, it gets sent over that same protocol and streamed to the user.
I have a question ultimately for Martin. Are there real world customer examples where we implement this? And I've definitely heard you in that this is one piece of a more comprehensive strategy. Are there actual numbers tied to outcomes that aren't just technical SEO, or how careful do I have to be when saying that I'm gonna cut your LCP score by a third, by a second, and you're going to get $100 million in extra revenue per year. Like, that feels like a stretch for me, especially since nobody's operating in a vacuum, and you're probably doing 20 optimizations at one time. But
So
in your experience,
Akamai are moving forward. These implementations are in live production. They have been for a couple of years. They are being used within the Fortune 10, at the highest level of retailer, and the highest level of requests per second from both bots and customers in some of the largest retail environments there are. And so I think it's safe to, from a standpoint, now they use it in a very unique use case that is not necessarily 100% applicable to every next retailer based on size, obviously. So if you're on Shopify, or you're on Salesforce Commerce, or you're on BigCommerce, or you're using WordPress or Drupal or Broadleaf, or any of the other e-commerce platform providers out there, you want to make sure that this is applicable. It is absolutely to all of those platforms, but you also want to make sure you tailor your use appropriately for your respective traffic website on your respective platform or CDN provider at that level.
sure. And I suppose it applies to us. Certainly, we were shocked to learn that a very large, very successful, highly performant publishing platform like Webflow supports a lot of optimizations, has CDNs built in, like, does almost everything you would want to do, but didn't support this. So being able to gain that much from an already optimized platform felt like a very easy win, especially since we walked through that implementation in about 10 minutes. So that's never actually been the case from a production perspective. It always takes longer than 10 minutes. But the value, as you said, we have repeatedly, seen these benefits to those core web vitals over time. So I guess one thing that I did want to point out, and because I get asked this often when I'm meeting with customers, is this universally accepted? Is this universally supported? Can I use early hints for all of my clients? And these are clients that are calling in that need to be able to accept the 103 response. Chrome obviously does. Most browsers obviously do. The holdout at this point is the Safari browser on iOS. So iOS Safari does not yet support it. They do support the preload and pre-connect headers in the HTML. So you can still put those into your HTML. It's still a best practice, and always will be, to support clients that don't necessarily support this partial response of HTML to trigger a download. Again, you have to wait until the HTML is loaded to hit that tag to begin to download those assets. But there's still a benefit to telling your browser what you need ahead of time. And we work with customers who have a wide variety of user bases, and iOS running on Safari is not a small contingent of a lot of people. It's iPhones, and unless you've switched to Google Chrome, you need to consider what is the investment in time, which I think we've demonstrated is relatively little. What is the investment in cost? And that could be your own internal costs, development resources, and then obviously the cost of a server to run something like this, or a distributed array of servers to run this for a widely distributed user base, versus what is the benefit? If 100% of your users are on iOS Safari, then it might not be as compelling a value proposition. But we want to reinforce that being able to deliver assets more quickly, being able to take advantage of something like Harper, where we can not only deliver full web pages, but API responses, all the other content. Speed is the ultimate goal, whether or not it comes before the HTML arrives, or if it's a function even of the back end, calling and building those pages, caching that HTML once it's built, and ultimately pushing it through a CDN to those end users. So without further ado, and I don't believe there are any more questions in the chat. Oh, hold on. We got one. How does 103 compare to code splitting? Is this mainly for spas or static sites too? It can be for every type of site. Code splitting, i.e., where I would have chunks of code that run, say, different parts of my pages, and I ultimately download this for this module right now that I'm importing onto my page. That code comes with. For a spa, where I am downloading HTML and making that call back for some piece of JavaScript, most often, that's going to render some new stuff. Unless I know perhaps the 5 modules that are loaded on my homepage, for example, or if I do have multiple pages that are individual spas or containers, ultimately I could early hint some of the assets. But again, we want to be judicious about what are the most important and impactful pieces of content we load. LCP is a really easy target and a core web vital. To the extent that a snippet of JavaScript or a style sheet affects other core web vitals, invest in that. Beyond that, now we're getting into the area where we're trying to hint everything. And as a result, we may not actually complete downloading all of that before the HTML returns. So again, be judicious and focus on the metrics that matter for your business. A lot of the engineers that we speak to who are in SEO are very focused on core web vitals. Site reliability engineers who are all about downloading the core assets so they can be cached in the browser, so that we at least know that the API may be slow, but the interface is going to load and render properly. The data may not arrive as quickly as we want while we're under pressure, but we want to minimize the impact of other parts of our app perhaps not performing as well as they could while we attempt to work on that. So it really depends. What is your constituency as somebody who's trying to perhaps optimize for somebody else, or what is your KPI as somebody who's inside a company trying to make this change a reality and to bring these benefits to your organization? So, absent any other questions, I think that'll do it. So I leave it to Martin for your last thoughts.
I think it's from an SEO, as we keep talking about SEO and potential engineering applications or KPIs, that a 103, a consumer user browser only has the overhead to accept a 103, a bot does not. But using a 103 and other techniques to accelerate or improve performance will have a strong, almost one-to-one cohort on bot behavior. As Google's watching and taking information directly from Chrome and directly from Android, Google is monitoring the consumer behavior as it interacts with your site. And thus, very, very quickly, bots will follow that behavior when noticing a change, a positive change in performant responses from your website for your customer. So a bot can't take a 103, but a bot, because of the Google environment, the Google ecosystem, will be monitoring the positive delta change improvement for the consumer, and the user bots will follow very quickly on changing their interaction, their crawl rates, their crawl budget, the number of pages indexed, and will have a downstream effect by improving performance on other marketing activities, other marketing initiatives.
Awesome. Brian, final thoughts.
As I mentioned, we've conducted, probably hundreds of performance efforts over the years. And, I can remember some of them, if we affected performance by 5%, like we'd all be doing backflips and cartwheels, high fives all around. This, I hope, showed everyone that was on the webinar and everyone that will watch it how, really with like a little effort, you can really boost that performance and get those, get those blocking assets to load before your page even loads. So I think this is pretty incredible, given that we've undertaken a lot of effort before to get less performance gain. This is pretty low hanging fruit, and I know in subsequent sessions that we're going to be doing here over the next few months, like we'll show other ways that if they're not as similarly simple, they are pretty simple still that can really move the needle in terms of performance.
Absolutely. And that dovetails right into what I'm saying as I thank you all for attending today. This is the 101 Early Hints education series, but next one will be 201. So content to be revealed then, but we are going to continually march through all of the ways that you can improve site performance. Hopefully all of the ways that Harper and Akamai and other providers that work together to deliver this performance for you in a cost-effective and hopefully simple manner. Hopefully every demo works and only takes 10 minutes to implement. But at the end of the day, we are committed to taking our composable web application platform and leveraging it to the benefit of not only our customers. So if you have ideas over the sorts of content, implementations, applications you'd like to see on this series, please reach out. We are always available and always also willing and able to help you get the most out of your site. So again, thank you for coming today. Thank you to my guests, Martin and Brian. And I really appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Brian. Thank you, Jackson.